All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another On the Contrary, the show that is unafraid to give you the spiciest takes, the ones least ready for public consumption, because there is no shame here. We're just giving thoughts. We're trying to win some money here. I'm Chris Spags, joined by the top DFS player in the world, the namesake of our website, Alex Baker, better known to all you folks out there as Awesemo. Alex, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Really excited for another week of some NFL here.
And I noticed that we got to point out the jersey right now, the Mitch Trubisky jersey. Alex going full tout. He did call out Mitch Trubisky last week, and now the jersey is here to celebrate his victories and rub it in all of our faces. So thanks, Alex. We appreciate that reminder.
Yeah, I mean the NFL, I love it how it's all about celebrations. So that was my moment as a tout. I feel like I had to kind of remind everyone about that. But the problem is the Bears aren't playing this week, so I can't tell you now to fade them because it's going to be too popular.
Can't have your cake and eat it too this week. And of course, also joining us, the football mastermind of Roto World, a man who's so good at his job that other NFL writers tweet about how they consult his column when making their DFS lineups. I love that, Evan. Mr. Evan Silva, how are you doing, Evan?
I'm doing well. Great call on Trubisky last week. Did you play a lot of Taylor Gabriel as well?
Yeah, I had some Gabriel.
Awesome, man. Awesome. That was the stone nuts last week. So that was excellent.
I just want to point out, though, I want to give you a little bit of props because I do have Robert Mays of The Ringer, and seeing you retweet him talking about how he'll make his lineups and then look at your column and confirm that you guys are on the same page and feel good if you guys are. That's a pretty big cosign from a guy who's pretty noteworthy in the industry right now.
Oh yeah, I love Robert Mays. He's a Chicago guy too, by the way. I had a chance to go to an event with him just before the season began. Super smart, super nice guy, and that was nice of him to give a little shout out.
Yeah, the Ringer NFL show is a good one if you are a person who is obviously trying to be good at this, like we all are. That's one that I would recommend adding to your diet. To start the show the last couple of weeks, we've had Alex asked a question by Evan. And Alex, I'm going to give you a chance to turn the tables this week because obviously Evan, Evan's a great mind. People are touting him on Twitter. People are talking about how he's the dude to follow. Do you have any questions for Evan about his process and things he sees that maybe you want to learn a little more about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm kind of wondering, like how do you kind of identify guys that maybe they haven't like had good games in the box score, but they're like candidates to have like a breakout week?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's really what we're all kind of trying to do. I think that using metrics, I mean, just simple metrics like targets, which I know that you use certainly, Awesemo. Is the guys like playing time on an incline? I want to look at the playing time. Is he starting to get more involved? Air yards, Josh Hermsmeyer has done a great job of putting together a website called airyards.com where it tracks not just the targets, but also the length of the targets and are players getting big play opportunities. A great example of the value of air yards this season would be with the Ravens because this year Michael Crabtree actually has 4 more targets than John Brown, but John Brown has twice as many air yards on the season, actually has the 3rd most air yards in the NFL, twice as many as Michael Crabtree. And, it's pretty clear, like, who's better in fantasy right now. It's John Brown. Another thing that I like to look at is, are players getting looks in scoring position? This also applies to the John Brown versus Michael Crabtree thing, because if you just look at raw targets, you think Michael Crabtree, he's getting all these targets, he's going to hit, but he's not getting looks in scoring position. John Brown actually has 5 end zone targets, 5 targets inside the 10-yard line, whereas Michael Crabtree only has 1. So that's like an indication that, hey, they're dialing up big play opportunities for John Brown. They're dialing up opportunities in scoring position for John Brown. Michael Crabtree is getting, a decent number of targets for sure between the 20s, but they're not trying to hit him deep, and they're not trying to hit him when they are down in close to the end zone.
Actually, I have a question too that I want to just, I guess maybe similar, but not really, for Alex before we dig in. I was reading an article and I forget where it was, but it was a breakdown of the top pro players in the Millionaire Maker. And the guy said that the one real difference that he's noticed in articles, or excuse me, in his research so far, is that a lot of the pro players will play really good players in spots that seem less than ideal, whereas casual players kind of avoid them. And this is a theme I wanted to come back to throughout this show, because I think there are a couple games that fit this criteria. But Alex, is that something you agree with, that pros are more inclined to kind of just play a guy like let's say a Pat Mahomes versus the Jaguars? Is that a situation you think that you come across?
Well, this actually makes me think of Josh Hermsmeyer again, because that guy's been all over Twitter kind of saying how defenses don't matter. But I think there's something to it if the players are low owned, because a guy like Julio Jones or Antonio Brown, it's like there's so much variance in their outcomes every week that if they're going to be low owned, that can give you an edge over the field. But I think for the most part, pro players are just kind of putting the projections in their optimizer, generate lineups that way. So I think if it's a tough matchup, it's probably just maybe they don't think it's as tough as you do.
Evan, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, also it gives the big time players an opportunity to get a stud with consistent monster usage at lower ownership, because they know that the field is going to react to the defense and maybe probably overreact to the defense. And therefore, Todd Gurley, when like last year when he was playing against Seattle, he went absolute bonkers in that Week 14 game, and people didn't want to play him because he was playing at Seattle. And actually they're playing at Seattle this week. I think that people are not quite as afraid of Seattle as in the past. But I still think that when people see at Seattle on the schedule, they'll be like, I think I'll go with Melvin Gordon at home against the Raiders instead. I think that the biggest thing is really probably the ownership, because the field is just going to overreact probably to the defense.
It's funny you mentioned Gurley, because Gurley is another player we'll talk about in a little bit, but he is one of the higher owned running backs on the slate. Bizarrely, despite Jared Goff's gigantic game, we are projecting Gurley for a ton more ownership than Goff going into Seattle. I think that's interesting. But let's get into the slate. Let's talk about the chalkiest game first, because this is one a lot of people will be playing. A lot of action on this game for pretty much everybody. We're currently projecting, and again, our ownership projections are available on osmo.com. Promo code CONTRARY, CONTRARY. We'll get you 1 week free to check out all the ownership projections and rankings generated by Osmo himself, as well as projections by other guys on our staff. Andrew, one of our guys, does a really good job with them as well. So go check that out. Join now. Promo code CONTRARY, 1 week free. Pittsburgh is projected to have ownership at pretty much everybody besides James Washington and Jesse James. A little bit of a James bias there. Slightly less ownership on Atlanta, but pretty much a very highly owned game as expected. Alex, how are you approaching a game like this where it's the highest point total on the board? It's a very Vegas adjusted one to all the scoring we've had. How are you going to handle this, given that the game seems necessary, but is going to be highly owned?
Well, I mean, whenever you see a total of what was it, like 54 or something like crazy?
I think it's got up to 57 on certain books. Yeah,
58, man. It's been rising like the entire week. Yeah, it's 58, man.
Well, whenever you see that, there's some great fantasy potential there. The one thing I noticed though is they're not popping up that much in my optimizers, which makes me think that the price has jumped up enough to compensate for the additional potential there. And actually, my biggest fade of the week, as of right now, is in this game. One of the highest owned players on both sites and the highest on FanDuel that we're projecting is Vance Mcdonald. And I just don't really see it. I mean, he's been getting some good targets in the last 3 games. Well, there's nothing aside from kind of having crazy big plays that really makes him stand out to me. And I don't think that's really predictive of how he's going to do this week.
Evan, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, well, Vance McDonald's my cash game tight end, man. So I don't like to hear that, No, I mean, I love the game, and it's just going to be, I mean, several players I think will go off in this game. I think that my one fade from this game would be Calvin Ridley. Um, he's really been living off touchdowns, and that is a little bit scary. I think that the guys that are cheaper, like Mohamed Sanu, Vance McDonald, Austin Hooper, James Conner. I think what do you guys where do you guys have him projected for ownership? Because I think that people might look at the recent box scores and maybe shy away from him.
We have him at about 20%, which would be actually more than Todd Gurley.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, people. I think the thing that sticks out to me looking at our ownership, and our projections can change a little bit between the days between now and tomorrow. It seems like people are just sharp and they know you have to get a piece of this game, but they're trying to be a little contrarian. If we're going to take our ownership projections as straight away, because like if you're going to have Vance McDonald's higher owned than Ben Roethlisberger, that makes no sense at all. That's just people like trying to get a piece of it and get something different. And I think that's why you play it straight and just play the guys who are going to be good and hope for the outcome, because I don't think people are going to be playing all these guys at once and maybe not onslaughting it as much as they should.
Yeah, I think that it can make sense though to have one-offs from the game, because like the players are so expensive, it makes it pretty hard to like fit in a game stack. So like Evan's call of James Conner, the ownership is going to be there too. But if everyone's playing the passing game, then playing a running back makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Atlanta, too, their running game is particularly under-owned according to our ownership projections. Devonta Freeman, to me, I think is a guy who's interesting, especially given that another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit, David Johnson, is projected for a lot of ownership. And Freeman, to me, looks like the only pivot in that range who makes sense. Coming off an injury, his ownership's going to be very low. But it's an interesting game. I don't know. Sanu's ownership is catching up, too. Sanu is a guy we've talked about a lot. He still seems like the guy who should get the benefit whenever Ridley regresses a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's still in the game more than Calvin Ridley, and their targets are not that far apart. So he is interesting as like a cheaper dart throw just to have exposure to the game. Guys who play like multiple sports, in DFS, I think really understand this concept, like just having access to the game, even if it's especially if it's like a lower owned cheaper guy like an NBA. You get access to the game. And you can end up getting a lower owned guy at better value, and just via having Mohamed Sanu or Austin Hooper or one of these guys that may go overlooked, whereas everybody else is trying to pay up for Julio and Antonio Brown and jam those guys in.
Yep, I'm with you there. Alex, you had your fades lined up for the week. Give us your next fade, and we'll talk about that game.
Well, I was kind of joking around on Twitter, but let me take a look at the ownership here. My big fade on DraftKings, other than Vance McDonald, would be the Titans defense versus Buffalo, because
oh no.
All right, so here's the thing: is they're like 3,900, which is like ridiculous for a defense, and like to make it worth it, you basically have to project them to get double-digit points or something like that. I just don't think there's enough difference between a really good defense and a really bad one to kind of justify going with them if they're going to be 29% owned.
Evan, I hope you're going to disagree, because I read your matchups column at Roto World, which is, again, out every week, a fantastic thing to read, a very important thing to read. The Tennessee defense seems like it's in the most perfect spot a defense could ever be in. They're also generating pressure. They've also looked good against much better teams. Are you buying them as a fade in this matchup?
I think that it would be based on ownership, I think, and that's what Awesomo's saying. So I don't necessarily think that they're going to like lay an egg. I mean, all the stats like align in terms of like the Bills are giving up sacks on almost 15% of their quarterback dropbacks, which is like, 5% higher than last year's league leader, the Colts, who give up sacks on 10% of their dropbacks. The Titans pass rush has been on fire. Over their last 3 games. They really got nothing going in their first game. They were missing Derek Morgan and Harold Landry, 2 of their best outside linebackers in that game, but they have been on absolute fire in terms of pass rush. They dominated the Eagles offensive line last week. So I think it would be an ownership thing. And I also think that there is some sort of like environment, narrative, old school betting concerns here, that you could factor in as well, because you have the Bills coming off this like embarrassing shutout loss at Lambeau, which was an obvious letdown spot after, upsetting the friggin' Vikings in Minnesota. That was an obvious letdown spot. And now they are coming back home in front of their home crowd after a tough 2-game road trip. And then the Titans upset the Eagles at home last week, and now they're going on the road to Buffalo. The Bills stink. They're the worst team in the NFL. Okay, we know that, but it would not surprise me if they play a little bit better than it shouldn't surprise anyone if they play really a lot better than what they did last week, because they just laid a total egg. So there are definitely some concerns. I mean, again, the pass rush statistics really align, but that things happen in games that we don't always anticipate, and I think that it would not surprise me at all if the Bills wind up playing better and giving the Titans a good game here.
I think the approach makes sense to me there. And I was actually on the Packers D last week a lot, which was very low owned, because people were like, well, Buffalo had that great game, and I guess they're just good now. And it is a logic there that kind of hurts a little, but I think you're right that people will be probably targeting this game more than they should. Our ownership doesn't show that they're targeting as much as I would have thought, though. So I think to me there is a bit of leverage there, especially people playing maybe some riskier games, like a lot of Ravens ownership going against the Browns. And, that's a very good matchup too, but Browns home game. You got Baker Mayfield. Who knows what he can do? I like Tennessee a lot. It's hard for me to get off them.
Fair enough. The defense that I kind of like at cheaper price, actually two of them. One's the Sunday night game, so you have to be playing not the main slate, but that's the Cowboys against the Texans. The Cowboys are getting back David Irving, stud interior pass rusher. Texans have just been hemorrhaging pass rush production all year. And then also the 49ers at home against the Cardinals. Those are two defenses that I've been looking at.
One more I'll throw out there, which is picking up a little bit of ownership. And this is, I think, more of a straight narrative play, maybe not a straight narrative, and their team totals kind of come down a little. The Jets are interesting to me. I think getting Todd Bowles as the coordinator for the week, I think some of the emotion of losing their coordinator to an illness and some of the quotes I saw around that. I don't know this is a thing that Alex will buy into, but the Jets defense has shown enough positive signs to me where I think, riding with them at home in a very emotional game where they're clearly playing for a coach who matters a lot to their head coach, that seems like kind of a nice spot for a defense to be versus a quarterback who's getting picked a lot and getting sacked a fair amount. Alex, what do you think about the Jets D?
Oh yeah, I definitely. They're showing up a lot in my crunch here. Because 2,600 is a pretty good price. Denver offensively isn't all that strong, so I definitely see. And also the ownership looks like it's pretty low on. It's 8% on DraftKings, which is pretty high, but on FanDuel it's only 3%. So I think that could be a pretty good play.
Evan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like it too. The Jets are third in the NFL in blitz rate, and Case Keenum has the third worst passer rating in the NFL when blitzed. Number one. The Broncos, their offensive line has run blocked much better than it is pass blocked so far, according to Football Outsiders. Case Keenum has been like an interception machine. Hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in 3 games, which that kind of, often may mean that he's headed for positive regression. But he just hasn't been playing well either, and this is another sort of narrative situation, like old school, sports betting, because you have the Broncos traveling across the country for a 1 p.m. Eastern time game to face this kind of desperate team. And the Broncos are also on a short week after melting down. And then they are heading to the Jets, who just played 2 really difficult road games. The first one was on a short week in Cleveland, and the second one was at Jacksonville, where they never had a chance in that game, so now they are heading home. And as you mentioned, they are in this position where, their head coach is on the hot seat. There are things going on with, the defensive coordinator and all that. So I definitely think that there is the thing is that they don't really get a lot of sacks, and that's really the first thing that I look for. That's actually a good question for Osimo as well. You know, that's the first thing that I look for is sacks, but so just from that standpoint, they don't stand out to me. But I definitely think that there's some strong logic to them. They're real cheap. But is there a certain defensive statistic that you first look for, Osimo?
I mean, the big ones are sacks and interceptions. Obviously, for interceptions, it's more who the opposing quarterback is than who the defense is, probably. But I mean, the sacks kind of each one of those, or like each interception, has a pretty good potential to turn into a defensive touchdown. So really, that's those are the two areas I'm evaluating.
Do you look at pass deflection rate at all, Alex? Because that's a stat which I've been looking at more, and I feel like it's put me on some teams, including last week with the Raiders. I mean, I guess it could make sense. Yeah, obviously a rookie quarterback going into Oakland is not going to be a great matchup. But to me, the thing that stood out is that Oakland was getting pass deflections, which to me means they're around the ball at least. And I think that's one stat which I've been seeing some positive defensive correlation with. Is that one you look at all?
I haven't looked at it, but it makes sense. Kind of interceptions are pretty rare, so maybe you look at some things that happen more commonly, like a tip pass, or like maybe like interception chances, if there's stats for that. I haven't dug that deep yet, though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that's where my thought went to it too. So I'm glad you're sort of on the same page, even if you're not looking at it. We'll share our pass deflection rates after this, Alex. We'll get you on board. Let's talk about another game which has a lot of scoring too. The second highest overall total on the game. Green Bay heading into Detroit. The ownership here kind of weird. We're currently projecting Marvin Jones to be the highest owned player on the slate, which price-wise makes a lot of sense on DK. I think it's still a game where there's a lot of places to look. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been looking that great health-wise. Evan, what do you think from an overall perspective? Is there anything you're seeing with Green Bay that would scare you off in this spot going into Detroit?
No, I don't have a whole lot to say about the Lions other than I think all the wide receivers are really good plays. It's hard to necessarily distinguish between them. Golden Tate is just getting a million targets. Galladay is getting a lot of air yards. Both he and Marvin Jones are both top 12 in the NFL in air yards. Marvin Jones has been getting a ton of end zone targets. Galladay, I think, is like the most talented dude. Nothing about, the Packers have been like mixing and matching in their secondary. Like in week 3, they played Josh Jackson, rookie at slot corner. Last week, they moved him outside. They put in Jair Alexander, another rookie. This week, they're getting back Kevin King. So like their cornerback situation is like real makeshift. Like they're mixing and matching right now. And so nothing really scares me about their secondary at all. And I think that all those Lions receivers are awesome plays. Matthew Stafford, I think, is an awesome play. We have the high total. We're playing indoors. On the other side is where, the antenna goes up because Randall Cobb is out. Geronimo Allison was DNP every day in practice this week. And then on Friday, they added a hamstring injury to him. So, and he already had a concussion. So he
Tough
looks
week for Geronimo.
he looks real unlikely to play. Okay. I mean, I'm surprised that he's even listed as questionable. And of course, watch him, pop up and play on Sunday. But based on the progression of the week, it looks real unlikely that he's not going to play. So that brings to life like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Jamon Moore. And it may even, raise the projection for like Jimmy Graham and Devontae Adams. Although Devontae Adams has been dealing with a calf injury, he's questionable. I think he's likely to play, but he's maybe not at 100%. Darius Slay is probably going to be on him. That's not something that necessarily should deter us from ever playing him. The dude had very good games against Tre'Davious White and Xavier Rhodes the previous 2 weeks. Aaron Rodgers throws the ball to receivers in tight coverage. He doesn't care, who's on him. But when you combine it with him potentially not being at 100%, that is a little bit of a concern. So Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Jamon Moore are very intriguing sleepers. You'll probably tell me that Marquez Valdez-Scantling has some crazy ownership percentage and he's not a sleeper. But I think it also makes Jimmy Graham interesting as well.
Yep. Marquez Valdez-Scantling currently under 6% ownership projected on DK. And yeah, he's a burner. He gets deep, and the Detroit defense gives up a lot of air yards. So I think that does make sense to me at some volume. Alex, what are you doing with this Green Bay pass attack?
So this game is really interesting because some players are really standing out, like Marvin Jones as great value. But overall, I'm finding it hard to kind of fit in the game stack because the prices for most of the players aren't that great. But I think if Devontae Adams, I mean, he looks like he's probably going to play. I think without Cobb, he should get a nice bump. And then Valdez Scantling is also kind of popping up. I think that if Geronimo Allison ends up being out, Scantling will be a pretty good play. And then Javon Moore, of course, at the minimum. Yeah, I think he'd be in play.
How about Jimmy Graham? Any thoughts on him?
So he's not jumping out a ton to me. On FanDuel, he's priced 6,100, which is it's a little bit high for his work so far. And on DraftKings, he's 4,700, which is it's in the medium range. So I'm not really seeing a great edge there personally.
One thing that just stood out to me, which I'm just going to throw out there, it actually got me to play in the mini max on DK. Probably a couple Detroit defenses. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is fully healthy. I just feel like I haven't seen the mobility from him I'm used to. And Detroit's stacking at the league high rate, at the highest rate in the league, rather. 11.5% of dropbacks are getting a sack. So just something I thought was interesting while we were talking about pass pressure being generated. Obviously, they're still giving up a ton of touchdowns and all that. But if you are playing a $2,200 defense, maybe there's a shot of some usefulness there. Let's see. Alex, let's talk about your favorite game that's all kind of off the board that people aren't talking about that you might consider game stacking.
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like the two games we talked about, the Pittsburgh one and the Green Bay one, those are going to be the really popular games. Some kind of my big off the board play. Actually, I better check the ownership before I say this.
We might need a drum roll for this, like
I'm nervous.
Is Russell Wilson versus the Rams.
Okay.
I'm definitely seeing some potential there because the Rams are probably going to be ahead, so Wilson's going to have to pass the ball a lot. The main thing I like is there are two great receiver plays that I'm seeing. Doug Baldwin, he's only $5K on DraftKings, which seems really low compared to his season last season at least. And then Will Dissly is out. So I'm seeing Nick Vannett at the minimum 2,500 being a pretty great play as far as value.
What do you think about Russell Wilson this week, Evan, going against the at home, but going against the tough defense in the Rams?
He's really hard to stomach because they haven't been running him. He's on pace for 44 rushing attempts. And his previous career low was 72 in 2016 when he was dealing with like all these leg injuries, and so he was like confined to the pocket. I wanted to play him last week. Thankfully, I did not. But I was like, I began the week thinking that I was probably going to play him, and I did not. And so I'm probably going to stay away from him, but there's definitely merit to it. I mean, he's got Doug Baldwin back. Tyler Lockett has that big playability. The Rams are, again, without Aqib Talib. We just saw, the Vikings do work against their defense on Thursday night. So, and the game script could absolutely add up to elevated pass attempts. Maybe we finally get those rushing attempts from Russ when he's dropping back the pass, more times than usual in this particular game. So it's a tournament play. We know that in the history, not this year, we haven't seen upside from Russell Wilson, but we know that he's got that in his toolbox. So I think it does make some sense.
Yeah, I think obviously we've seen what the Rams offense can do and how many points they can put up. And that's one thing which I want to point out too while we're talking about this game. Jared Goff and the wide receiving core of the Rams looks wildly underowned so far. No player amongst that entire group over 7% ownership projected on DraftKings, whereas Todd Gurley projected for a hair under 20%. I think, to me, going with that passing attack, we just saw what they did versus a Minnesota team who was, in theory, at least better than Seattle. I think that offense is clicking in a way where it also will help out Wilson, but the ownership on Goff is ridiculous to me after he just put up like a 500-yard, 6 TD game. Like, let's give the guy a little love. Poor Jared Goff. It's no respect.
Well, he's not Trubisky,
Who is in this workaday world?
Man, Alex just taking victory lap after victory lap. I wanted to mention in terms of a game stack, not necessarily that I think it's going to be a massive shootout, but Carolina against the Giants. I really like Cam and McCaffrey in this game. The Giants have given up the most rushing yards so far in the league to opposing quarterbacks, and they're playing more man coverage this year under James Bechter, who comes from the Cardinals. The Cardinals used to give up a decent amount of rushing yards back in the day when he was their defensive coordinator. And man coverage defenses do tend to allow more rushing yards to quarterbacks. So I like that for Cam Newton. Coming off the bye, they're getting back their stud right guard, Trey Turner. They have been just blowing huge holes in the middle of defensive lines so far this year. Football Outsiders has them as the number one run blocking team in the NFL, and that's even without Trey Turner in there. McCaffrey is kind of like due, for lack of a better term, for a touchdown. I think that regression is going to hit him positively because he's been getting the ball a lot, and he has gotten opportunities in scoring position, just hasn't executed, or Cam has run it in, or CJ Anderson breaks off this screen pass and scores a touchdown from 24 yards out. But I like Cam and McCaffrey together, and then bringing it back with OBJ against Carolina.
Yeah, the Carolina defense to me stands out as not being that great. And after what Eli did last week, I think that, he kind of scared me off of him. I was very in on the matchup versus the Saints, and he just looked bad. I mean, the eye test wasn't there. Though if there were a week for Eli to win you a millionaire maker, I do feel like this is the week where he's under 1% owned, with his wide receivers also under 5% owned, versus a Carolina defense who gives up a 69% completion rate. It hurts me, but I will have a little Eli Manning. And Carolina obviously looks fantastic. McCaffrey going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate, and justifiably so. Alex, what do you think about that game?
Yeah, I really like your Eli Manning call. Obviously Eli Manning, not the greatest fantasy player, but the stack as a whole looks really good because you get Eli for cheap, and then you can stack him up with Barkley, who's getting a ton of targets, and Beckham. And I think if he's going to be 1% owned, like you're saying, that has some really good potential to win the tournament.
Yeah, Sterling Shepard too. His ownership is down, but I mean, without Evan Ingram in the lineup, he's been getting a ton of targets. If he can't throw it deep, Shepard is the guy he defaults to. I just think there's a lot of plays on that side that look good, and the Carolina offense shouldn't have much issue getting going. So the Giants have to try something. And if it's not this week, then I'm done with Eli. Eli and I are breaking up if he doesn't do it this week. Let's talk about one game. I'll tell you my favorite game that's a little off the board, which I am crazy about, talking about what we discussed earlier in the show with Alex, with the pros playing guys who were in suboptimal spots but seem great. I am crazy about the Chiefs this week. There was one thing I saw in particular from Warren Sharp, who's another great football mind who does shows with Evan Silva that you should tune into. But he mentioned that the Jaguars defense is much worse versus 12 personnel, 2 tight ends versus 11 personnel, which is where they really excel. I think the Chiefs will know that. The Chiefs are such a smart offense and so well run. I think they're going to find a way to attack this Jacksonville defense. I also think Tyreek Hill is extra motivated for this matchup with Ramsey. At under 5% ownership, I love every part of it. I'm all over this game. I'm all over Mahomes, and I don't see any reason why not to. Evan, give me a reason why not.
Yeah, well, first of all, the Chiefs just naturally use a ton of 2 tight end sets, just naturally. So that is good. They play Demetrius Harris a lot. Demetrius Harris will every once in a while pop up for a big play, and that's because he's on the field. And guess what? Sammy Watkins is dealing with a hamstring injury. He was limited in practice all week. It's supposed to be raining in this game. So can you play Sammy Watkins on a hamstring? First of all, I don't want to diminish that for, the prospects of this game as a fantasy game, but because really all that matters is wind. And if anything, the rain factor is just going to scare people off that shouldn't be scared, So, but if it's raining and you have a wide receiver with a hamstring injury who couldn't return to last week's game, now you're on a short week. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to play him. So that would give them even more incentive to use a lot of 12 personnel. And I mean, no one can cover Tyreek Hill. Like Jalen Ramsey is, maybe the best corner in the league. You can't cover Tyreek Hill for 7 seconds when Patrick Mahomes is back there rolling around, in behind the line of scrimmage. So I love the Tyreek Hill call for sure. I like the Jaguars side too. I think that Bortles is probably going to get a lot of ownership, but I think that there's merit to that. But I like this game, even though I think that it is going to involve some rain. Alex, do you look at weather very much?
I think that it's kind of incorporated in my model indirectly, but from what I've heard, like the weather doesn't make a huge impact unless there's wind, or like if there's like a crazy amount of snow, that's huge. But if it's just raining, I'm not gonna probably think about that too much.
With rain, like that can impact the defense too. Like think about it, just think about it. Like you're out there, in your backyard, you as a receiver, if you're the receiver, you have the first step, you have the advantage. Whereas the defensive back, if someone's trying to cover you, they're like stepping backwards into the soggy surface. They're actually more at a disadvantage. The thing that would worry me is, hey, if the coaches are like, well, it's going to be raining, so let's run the ball more or something like that. That would be a concern. But I think that just from like an offensive versus defensive matchup standpoint, like it could actually benefit the offense in a lot of scenarios.
Chad in the chat asking which Jacksonville wide receiver can I stack Bortles with? And by the way, we are paying attention to the chat. We're just trying to get through the main stuff I wanted to hit. But drop your questions in chat. We'll hit more of them down this backstretch here. For me, and it's something actually, Evan, your column put me on too, but I was already thinking it. Dede Westbrook looks like the best play to me. He's just getting highly targeted. I could see the reason of going back to Cole. Cole's had a quiet couple weeks. We're currently projecting for the most ownership, though, and he's the highest price. I'd rather take the discount, go with the Dede. We know he's getting targets. He's shown explosive yards after catch ability. And this is a Kansas City team who gets beaten just across the field in a ton of ways. So I'd rather go Westbrook and Moncrief out of that group. And I also love Yeldon. I have a ton of full onslaught Jaguar stacks. I think Bortles has, 25 points when Fournette's out per game versus like 18 when he's in the game. It all sets up perfectly to me to game stack this. So I'm on Westbrook and Moncrief the most. Evan, who would you go with if you had to choose one receiver, though, for Jacksonville?
Yeah, this is what I'm struggling with. I like Dede Westbrook the best as a talent. He has the most targets on the team. You look at from a matchup standpoint, the Chiefs have given up the most 20-plus yard completions in the NFL, and Dede Westbrook leads the Jaguars in 20-plus yard receptions with 6. You look at his college track record, like he almost won the friggin' Heisman in 2016. He won the Blitnikoff Award as college football's top receiver. He's just good. And we've seen that. I think, Dante Moncrief has like by far the most air yards in the offense. He had the best game last week. I think he's got the best matchup. I think that the best place to attack the Chiefs defense is on the perimeter, and Dante Moncrief primarily lines up on the perimeter. Keelan Cole plays outside and inside. So he will move around a lot. And he has had big games before. So it's really hard for me to pick. I'm with you. I would go like 34% Dede, 33%, Keelan Cole, and 32% Dante Moncrief.
And you'd still be way above the field on all those guys. The guys getting the most ownership right now are Bortles and Yeldon by a fair margin, but still not enough ownership, I think, compared to what they may have to put up. Alex, what do you think about this game and the Jacksonville side in particular?
I think, judging from the ownership, I think they're a good play. Definitely Yeldon is jumping out the most at me. And I think you can stack him with Bortles because he's getting a lot of targets. And then as far as which receiver also to put in there, I think, you can pretty much just pick randomly and have about as good a chance. So just mixing in Westbrook, Cole, and Moncrief. I think it'll be pretty random which one of them has a good game.
And just a quick reminder, everybody, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We're doing a ton of content like this every day, a lot of things out there that make you a better DFS player. So give us a like right now. We're here working hard on a Saturday, and we appreciate you joining us. But tip your bartender. Throw us a little like on YouTube. That helps us out. Let's talk about one more game, which I've seen people touting as a sneaky spot, so I don't know if it is sneaky, but our ownership does have it looking pretty good. Minnesota and Philadelphia. Philadelphia at home, coming off of a tough loss. Minnesota's defense looking very beaten up, very weakened since one of their players has possibly gone a bit crazy. Not a great spot defensively for them the last couple showings. What are we thinking about this game, Alex? Is there anything that stands out to you as being interesting? Because I think from a DFS perspective, that Philly side looks really good.
Well, Zach Ertz is always on my radar for tight ends because he's one of the guys that consistently gets a ton of targets. And Adam Thielen, I mean, he's a great wide receiver option, but overall, this game isn't looking like one I'm gonna stack up just because there's so many different ways to be contrarian, and that's just another game is jumping out a little bit more.
Evan, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the Eagles can't cover wide receivers at all. Stephon Diggs is a baller. Adam Thielen is a baller. There's no chance that the Vikings are going to be able to run the ball on the Eagles. Like, the Eagles have the best run defense in the league. The Vikings have the worst run game in the league. Dalvin Cook, I don't know why they played him on that Thursday night game. That was stupid. He aggravates his hamstring injury. Of course he does. And they're not going to be able to run the ball on the Eagles. It's just really hard to imagine, So I think that Kirk Cousins is going to end up dropping back to pass 50 times in this game. And, maybe the Eagles get 6 sacks, but feeding the rock to Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, time and time again. The Vikings' new OC, John DeFilippo, was on the Eagles staff for the last several years, was the quarterback's coach last year. And, he should have a pretty good sense of where his team is weak versus the strengths of the Eagles. And, I mean, it's very clear, I think, based on how these teams have performed, really even dating back to last year. The teams, it's very clear what the strengths and the weaknesses are. So I think that I like the potential for a lot of volume for Kirk Cousins. They're coming off the extra 2 or 3 days of preparation and rest to get their offensive line, which was really banged up, get that offensive line healthy. And so maybe they can protect a little bit better than expected in this game. But I mean, I don't think that the Eagles cornerbacks can cover the wide receivers for the Vikings. And I think that Kirk Cousins is going to end up having to throw the ball a lot. And on the other side, Alex mentioned Zach Ertz. Dude has double-digit targets in every single game so far, and he has 0 touchdowns. And he has been getting plenty of work in the red zone. So, it's about time for him to get in the end zone. Vikings have not been particularly good against tight ends. Their safety play has been really, really disappointing so far. They're going to be without Trey Waynes, their left cornerback in this game. I think that Nelson Aguilar is really interesting because no one's going to play him. And he has double-digit targets in 3 of the 4 games. He just stunk last week. I mean, he dropped 3 passes, and Wentz missed them for some big play opportunities. And the Vikings have not been very good in the slot, ask Cooper Kupp. So I think I do like this game. And I think it's going to go over the total. And money has been on the over because it opened at 44.5, and it's up to 46.5. And it would not surprise me if by Sunday morning we see it up above 47. Sorry.
Yeah, Aguilar, I want to point out because I think he was in your column, or it might have been something I saw on Twitter, but I think he had the most air yards in the league last week rather. And he had a terrible week. Jeffrey looked good though in his return. Aguilar back in the slot, I feel like is an interesting thing too. I just like every part of this game, I think seems really interesting to me. And the Philly side, the Minnesota side, I think I would game stack both quarterbacks if you're doing a bunch of lineups and try to get a piece of the other side. Ertz looks good. I don't know. I just think this game is coming at the end of the slate. It's 2 teams who've shown they could put up 30 points plus a game Kirk Cousins is averaging 47 attempts a game. Wentz is averaging 44 attempts a game. It seems like a high octane spot as long as the defenses don't figure each other out. And the DiFilippo point is an interesting one too. We've seen a couple of weeks ago, obviously, with Matt Patricia, a coordinator going against his former team, even if he's not a great coach, can figure out some spots to attack and how to beat the team that he was working for. And I think that definitely fits here as well. Let's see. Anything good in the chat? Drop your questions in the chat right now. Give us a like before you drop your questions in the chat. It'll make us much more likely to talk about your question, I'm sure. David Parker asking about Keenan Allen. Let's talk about this Chargers game. Alex, what do you think about the Chargers? Another one of the highest point totals on the slate this week. Oakland been actually very good through the air too. Derek Carr looking kind of competent and very cheap as well. What are you doing with this game, Alex?
Let me bring up my crunches here. It's not one that's been jumping out a ton to me. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not really seeing anyone from this game popping up for me. Yeah, Evan, what do you think?
What game?
Chargers, Oakland.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really like it. I really, really do. First of all, I like it when teams that can't rush the passer on both sides square off against each other. Mm-hmm. I like it when teams that are both giving up a lot of big plays in the passing game square off against each other. And both of these teams have given up in the top 5 of 20-plus yard completions. Keenan Allen, the usage has been there for him. It's just the production kind of hasn't. They've had some weird game scripts and, he had a big game in week 1 and we haven't seen him have a big game in 3 weeks, and he's off the injury report this week, and the Raiders have been getting crushed by slot receivers. He's in the slot like 60% of the time. He is number 1 in number 2 in Hermsmeyer's buy low air yards model this week. Like to see that. So I do like him. Phillip Rivers is just super, super consistent, playing at a high level, should be protected pretty well in this game. On the other side, the Raiders, like their offensive production has really gotten better every week so far under John Gruden, and we saw them like rip up a Browns defense that shut down Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees in 2 of its first 3 games, and of course the Jets did nothing against them as well. I mean, the Browns have a lot of talent on defense. I don't think that they're particularly well coached, but they played really well early on, and then we saw them all of a sudden go out to Oakland and get lit up by Derek Carr and company. Melvin Gordon, I think, is in a really good spot. As a home favorite against a Raiders defense that has been pretty bad against the run. He's been used a lot in the passing game so far. I think that he's like a cash game play. And then Austin Eckler, I think, is an intriguing tournament dart throw. He's gotten double-digit touches in 3 of 4 games. And the Raiders, you want to like go back and look at Nick Chubb's runs last week, like to see how slow the Raiders are. Nick Chubb just breaking off these monster touchdown runs against this slow-ass Raiders defense. And Austin Eckler, he's got speed, man. He ran 4.42 coming out. That's why anybody even gave him a look. He was too small, and he didn't get drafted, but he got a shot and he capitalized on it. He's got speed. I definitely like this game.
One matchup question I have for you that I've heard a couple podcasts and shows talk about. Amari Cooper apparently has some struggles with Casey Hayward, and this is actually probably an Alex question too, but Evan, I'll hit you first. Is that something you would worry about here? Do you think Cooper might struggle with Hayward? Because I don't see it as an overall team defense being an issue, but sometimes guys just get their asses kicked by certain DBs.
Yeah, I mean, Casey Hayward has not been that great this year, though. I mean, the whole Chargers defense has been a huge letdown so far this year. And if you look at the receivers that have given the Chargers problems, it has been speed receivers like Brandon Cooks and Tyreek Hill. And Amari Cooper ran 4.42 coming out of Alabama. And I was looking the other day at average yards of separation on Next Gen Stats. And Amari Cooper, among receivers with at least 30 targets, leads the entire NFL in average yards of separation at 3.8. So he's creating almost 4 yards of separation every time he's targeted. That's pretty impressive. Now that can be like skewed by a wide open catch, for sure. And we're still in small sample sizes, but I mean, he has had 2 big games so far, and he really hasn't had monster games to skew it. But he's, I expect up and downs from him. I could never play friggin' Amari Cooper in cash, but if you're trying to, I don't think he's going to be high owned, and I'm not too worried about Casey Hayward. That was the question.
Yeah, I think Cooper's in a good spot too, and I think the volume's going to be there for the pass game, and that's sort of what I would look at. Also, Jordy Nelson, I feel like it's worth pointing out. I thought he was pretty washed up, but man, he's getting targets and he's doing something with them, and I don't mind him at 4,500 in this matchup either. They're going to be playing from behind. Nelson getting targeted pretty deep downfield. Not the highest on the team, but still pretty high relative to the rest of the league. It just makes sense to me overall to maybe consider rolling Oakland out there. And also, it's going to be a home game for Oakland, by the way, even though it is in LA. The Chargers have been practicing all week as though it's going to be a very loud crowd in favor of the Raiders, and it almost definitely will be, I can say, as an LA native. So I think that adds a little bit of benefit as well to the Raiders. Let's see. One question in chat real fast from Chad, who's asked this question a couple times, and he said he's seen your lineups in the tournaments, Alex, and he wants to know, is the best GPP build to have 2 high-volume RBs or just to load up with 3 in the flex too? How would you approach the high-volume running backs for a GPP build?
Well, I think those guys are definitely usually worth spending money on. I'm not really I'm not really sold one way or the other if you should spend more money on running back or wide receiver. It might have just been that last week there weren't a lot of kind of cheap running backs to get. But in general, actually, I like spending up at wide receiver if you can find the value running backs. Yeah, I think just last week there weren't a ton of great values.
Yeah, and there were a lot of great wide receiver values last week. You had Tyler Boyd, you had Sterling Shepard, people who played Mike Williams. A lot of guys in that 4 to 6K range who were a little cheaper and made it easier to afford the running backs. I think this week it goes the other way where you have, Yeldon, you have Aaron Jones, and you can afford some of the higher priced wide receivers. And that might be the approach that people have in GPPs. Let's close this out by going position by position. Give me your favorite contrarian QB pick, Alex.
Well, this is kind of odd to me because he was so popular last week, but Andy Dalton versus Miami, he's supposed to be 3% owned or something. And I just think, their team total is one of the highest on the slate. There's obvious plays that you can stack him up with Mixon, Boyd, and Green. So I'm just kind of curious why he's being overlooked. I think he's one of the better plays.
I'm with you. And CJ Azoma, too, I think is worth pointing out there, 2,900, filling in for Tyler Eifert. The tight end is a pretty key role there. And actually, read Evan's matchups column for that, his breakdown on the Cincinnati game, too. I thought that was really good. Throwing one more plug for you, Evan. Evan, how about a contrarian QB pick for you?
Yeah, I really like Cam, and I feel like no one is discussing him this week. I'm not going to use him as my pick because he's expensive and, everyone knows who he is. He's not really that contrarian, but I'm surprised that he is not getting more attention. Let me see. I'm looking at some guys here. Give me a second.
No, we just had one pick. This is your pick. This is the one we're putting your balls on.
No. I'm not. Okay, I am not taking Cam Newton as my contrarian pick. I will go with Kirk Cousins because of the reasons that we outlined. We talked about him. I'll stand by him.
Okay, that's a good one too. I would have gone Blake Bortles, but his ownership is actually pretty high up there relative to some of these other guys. So I'll go with my boy Patrick Mahomes. We discussed the reasons why. I just think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a great quarterback in a spot where he's going to have to throw it and have to score touchdowns, even if the yardage isn't there. So I'm on board with Patrick Mahomes this week. Contrarian running back pick, Evan. How about there?
Start with Alex. Sorry.
Alex, how about you? The coward Evan Silva won't go first.
This is a tough one for me because I really like a lot of the chalky ones this week, like McCaffrey and Johnson. One guy I might look into is Kenyon Drake. Obviously, last week he only played half the snaps because Frank Gore took a lot of the workload. But as far as the GPP play, I don't think that's going to be just what happens every week. I think there's some room for if he gets off to a hot start, he'll probably be fed the ball a lot more than Gore. and he's only 4,700 on DraftKings. So that leads me to believe there's a pretty good chance he could outperform his salary.
All right, Evan, you got one now?
Yeah, I mentioned Eckler. I think that the Titans backs are both interesting in a game where, although, expressed concern that earlier that it may not go like we expect it to go quite like that. But still, the Titans are expected to go there and kind of dominate. And really the money has actually come in on the Titans. So that bodes well. I mean, they opened as 4-point favorites. They're up to 5.5. So that bodes well. And I think that on DK, you would go Dion Lewis, and on FanDuel, you could look at Derrick Henry. No one's really going to want to play those guys. Derrick Henry, he has 0 touchdowns through 4 games. Like, he isn't going to do anything unless he scores touchdowns, but I think that this is a spot where he could get in the end zone. The Bills have given up the most touchdowns to running backs through 4 games. They've given up 7. And then Dion Lewis, of course, he can catch passes, and I think he's like a better football player than Derrick Henry right now. And then Buck Allen. So Alex Collins has gotten benched twice so far this year for fumbling at the goal line. And Buck Allen over the course of the season has a lot more chances inside the goal line, and he's been efficient with those chances. So I don't think that Alex Collins is going to be getting very many goal line chances in the forthcoming future. Buck Allen plays in the passing game. He's not like a dynamic talent, but he can play in the passing game. And I noticed a beat writer tweeting that yesterday that Alex Collins didn't look right in practice on Friday. And Harbaugh did come out and say that he expects Alex Collins to play, but Alex Collins missed Thursday's practice, returned on Friday. The beat writer said it was due to a knee injury. A beat writer said that he didn't think he looked right. So just kind of like a lot of red flags here on Alex Collins, and we might see Buck Allen get a little bit bigger workload than people anticipate this week against the Browns.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I will go with a pairing with my defense pick, who I think is interesting. Go with Isaiah Crowell. 1% ownership. It just seems like a matchup fit to me. This is a really weird one. This is a dart toss one. I'm not saying go 50% Isaiah Crowell, but a little bit of Isaiah Crowell could go a long way if that game plays out like I'm imagining, a very emotional one, which just smashed mouth on both sides of the ball. And let's close it out with Alex, your contrarian wide receiver / tight end pick. Any pass catcher. We'll just go like that.
This one might be really contrarian because I saw he's only 1% owned on each site, but I'm sticking to my theme here, all the same game. Albert Wilson is like pretty close to the minimum on both sites. There's a one condition here. Like, I'm only going to play him if Devontae Parker is not playing, because the game Devontae Parker played, Albert Wilson only saw like 25% of the snaps. Strangely enough, that was like his best game. But last week when Parker wasn't playing, he saw about 3/4 of the snaps. He's targeted a lot more on snaps he does play than the other receivers so far this year. Yeah, and Parker is questionable, so I think there's a pretty good chance that he'll see a good workload this week.
Evan, contrarian pass catcher.
I like how Alex always works in finds a way to work in a mention of Devontae Parker into every show.
He really is a big Devontae Parker guy, unquestionably.
Yes, he's very aware of the impact that Devontae Parker's having. I will go with Taijuan Taylor at Buffalo. His playing time and targets have been on a steady incline. Corey Davis, who, I totally blew it last week. Like, if you watch the week 3 Marcus Mariota game against the Jaguars and saw how the ball was coming out of his hand, there was no way that you were playing any member of the Titans passing game last week. And certainly looking at the fact that, hey, they were, playing Philadelphia and, but it was dreadful. And then all of a sudden, like, their passing game just goes nuts against the Eagles last week, and Corey Davis goes off. But this week, I think this game will be a surprisingly close game against Buffalo, and Tre'Davious White, one of the better cornerbacks in the league, I think will chase around Corey Davis. That doesn't mean that Corey Davis is going to get shut down, but if it could just funnel, a target or two extra to Taijuan Taylor, whose usage is already on that incline, then I think he can benefit. And the dude is fast. I mean, he's real fast. He's broken off some monster screenplay touchdowns, both in the regular season and in the preseason. And I really like them coming out of college. They remind me of like Emmanuel Sanders. So I think the time is now for Taijuan Taylor, and he's an intriguing GPP dart throw this week.
And for me to close it out, I will go with, well, actually one pick I have is Kenny Stills. I like Kenny Stills a lot, and I'll just want to troll Alex's pick. I'll go with him as one. But my actual favorite one is Dede Westbrook. I just think he's a great player. He's in a good spot. I don't care about the rain. I think Bortles is going to do a great job this week. And Westbrook, to me, grades out as the best wide receiver on that core. And they are going to need to put up points and everything that I'm hoping for. So that's my pick for this one. That is it for us. Alex, any parting words for the folks before I do my spiel and close this out?
Yeah, just thanks everyone for watching. Thanks again, Evan. It's always a pleasure having you on our streams. Looking forward to the next time.
All right, Evan, how about you? Anything to plug? Anything you want to say to the people?
No, likewise. Thanks for having me back. We've had a great time doing these shows, learned a lot, and good luck to everyone this week.
Cool. Yeah, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. Throw us a like, subscribe to the channel. Promo code Contrary on Osmo.com will get you 1 week free. A look at all of Alex's rankings and ownership projections, along with other premium content, including articles by Alex, who is the top DFS player in the world. So as you might be able to tell from the show, his brain does provide some value. So go sign up 1 week free with promo code Contrary at Osmo.com. And we will be back next week. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck. We're rooting for you, and we'll see you again soon.